Hello and welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Rett. How are we doing?
We're doing great. It's nice to share their podcast with somebody that's on my continent.
Yes. Yeah, we are a little bit closer than most of my
Yeah.
guests.
Although now that I think about it, I'm actually on the Asian side of Istanbul. So you're not in my continent. You could be if I were on the European
Yes.
side, but I'm actually on the Asian side. So no, we're close, but not
No
totally
cigar.
there. Yeah.
That is actually a very interesting point because Turkey's got both sides of it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Bosphorus separates the European and the Asian side here.
Yeah.
So we're where the land is cheaper right now. That's where I am. I'm where it's easier to find real estate.
Nice. That's a bonus. That is a bonus. Yeah. But before we get carried away with landmarks, if you can give us a little breakdown of how you got into strength and conditioning and how your career sort of progressed from there.
Yeah, I got into it about 15 years ago or so. I think, no, 20. What am I talking about? And it was, as a personal trainer, and I stumbled into my third day on the job as a personal trainer because I had this really good certification. I was able to start training a bunch of elite athletes, a couple of NBA players from the Indiana Pacers. One of them became superstar that season after I trained him, got his team to he got a Pro Bowl selection. He was named the most valuable player of the NBA. And so that kind of sparked my interest in training professional athletes. And so I then started studying really hard in that area. I went to work at a place called Velocity Sports Performance, where I got a great mentor named LARON, who won a bunch of NCAA track and field championships. So the guy knows everything about speed. And I got to there's a crash course in making athletes apply a lot of force into the ground in a really quick time. And that ended up being a decades-long career for me with this one company, where eventually I rose through the ranks and ended up taking his position as the director of performance for the whole network. And that's also where I started not only getting a lot of time with more professional athletes, but actually that company specialized in training younger athletes, like 8 to 18-year-olds, which turned out to be invaluable in my development as a coach. Learning how to control a group of 11-year-old boys and keep them sweaty but smiling, make them smarter when they talk to their parents on the ride home, talk about dorsiflexion and strength deficits. Like, that's the kind of thing that has served me really, really well since then, is being able to take, the group control aspects, the ways that I educate. I still do the same things today with elite athletes. And so after a long time working in the States with that company, I got an opportunity to go to China and train the Chinese Olympic teams with a company called Exos. And that's the most crucial decision of my professional life, because we went over there with a small team of coaches and physios for the London Games to get them ready for the London Games. And after the games, that went well enough that I got hired by the Shanghai athletes, the Shanghai Sports Committee. And then I kind of went back and forth between Shanghai and then the Olympic Training Center. Eventually, I got on with the women's volleyball team in China, which is actually their most important team sport, women's volleyball. And I trained them for the Rio Olympics, and we ended up from coming, like a Disney style kind of moment where we came from behind and ended up winning a gold medal. And that has fortunately pigeonholed me in women's volleyball for the last decade. And I have been working in women's volleyball now for 10 years. And that women's volleyball, I went from the Chinese team to the Dutch team to now the German team. And I am working now with a club team in Istanbul. And so that takes you up to speed with where I am.
Nice. I think as well, the multi-sports, and you've kind of mentioned a couple of things I want to go back to. Currently in your role or in the industry, fires you up the most?
I think that the advent of like social media, like the ability to share ideas, is the most exciting thing out there. I think that whereas I used to look forward to going to conferences to hear about, filling up a notebook of all the new ideas and new ways of thinking and things that the best practitioners in the world are doing. Now that's all at my fingertips. I guess it always was, but for whatever reason, Instagram seems to be a good delivery vehicle for a lot of these ideas, as well as YouTube. And it's a great time to be alive. I mean, you have to be good at curating it. You have to be good at filtering it. You have to be good at, making the algorithm not waste all your time and give you the best stuff. But when you get that right, I think it is, that gets me excited. I mean, that's the reason that it's addictive and ruining people's lives, is that it is an incredibly wonderful way to learn if you can learn through it.
100%. I was having this conversation with Brian Mann, and we kind of share the same opinion as you on social media. And it's the only spending enough time and curating it to the way that, to what you want to learn about it. Because like you can definitely go down some rabbit holes.
Oh yeah. Even if I'm just watching Brian's Fad Fridays, I can get stuck on those for way too long, and that's all great stuff. But if you are following guys like Brian Mann, I mean, you are getting smarter, and you are, that is research based. But I also think there is an absolute place in this world for people coaches that you've never heard of from the far reaches of the globe that are doing things you've never heard of, like that you never thought to do. And that's where a lot of inspiration I get comes from. The things that attract me now are that out of the box thinking. Yeah.
I'm not going to spoil this because he is coming on again, he does every Christmas episode, but Paul Comfort is going to come on, and so I'm not going to tell the exact specific thing, but his wife bought a program from an influencer-esque coach, and she was doing a specific exercise, and Paul was like, what are you doing? And then his wife sort of taught him a new lift through this coach, which was pretty fascinating. But I 100% agree. It's like, again, I'm Portuguese, and I've said this on the podcast a million times, but I'll say it again. In Portugal, there's a quote that translates to, you can learn something from everyone. Even a dumb person, you can learn not to be them. But it's like this concept of like every conversation you have, you can take away something from it. So like if you're finding a coach from like, say, China, and he's speaking really like about a specific thing very well, you're like, oh, actually, I never thought about it that way. And it kind of then gives you this opportunity to like explore and expand your current knowledge. This is a quick shout out to our main sponsor on this channel, TeamBuilder. TeamBuilder is all-in-one platform that hosts programs, questionnaires, testing, anything that you may need for your athlete's performance, you can host it in TeamBuilder. TeamBuilder also now has 2 different sides, which is OS and Practice. For more information on TeamBuilder, check out the link in the description. And if you use code PAChalkup all together, you will get a 30-day free trial.
Well, you know that there's a wonderful example of this, and it's that strategy game Go, which is this game that's been played in China forever. It's like 10 times more optionality than chess. Like, it's more complicated than chess. And the biggest geniuses in the world play this game called Go. And they've been playing it for centuries. I think it originated in China. Anyway, they taught AI how to play Go, and they put it up against a grandmaster. And in the third move, AI made a silly play, just that no one would ever consider. And you see where this is going. AI ends up winning the game. But it's because it has no preconceptions. It comes from total left field. It doesn't understand what's been played, in the past. It can see a bigger picture. And sometimes these naive coaches, sometimes they stumble upon something that is really wonderful and useful. And I think it is silly to just dismiss people that maybe don't have all the experience just outright, without considering that there's a chance. We've all been young before. And I bet you might think that you were a better than average young coach. I think I wasn't just a total moron when I was a young coach. I think I had some pretty good ideas. And I always try to think of that when I'm looking at these young whippersnappers on Instagram or tipped, that there might be some kernels of genius lurking.
100%. So I always keep my old programs. Like, I have my very first program that I've ever written. And again, sometimes I go back just a chuckle. But like the other times I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, where was this coming from? And like with the knowledge that I have now, can I tweak it to make it work.
Yeah. If I look at old programs, I can tell exactly where I was when I like took a kettlebell course. And I was like, okay, there now I see that. Okay. That must have been right after I did the Pavel course. So, okay. All right. And yeah, I was very, yeah, but we're malleable, you know,
Mm-hmm.
get better, but you end up you're discarding the stuff that didn't work and keeping the stuff that did. And that's where I am. There's imprints of every course I've ever taken in my programming today. It just, it all mets out at the end.
We were kind of speaking about this, but like the podcast, and like I think by the time this episode comes out, I'll be on like 120-ish episodes. So
Wow.
like all these conversations kind of bleed into my programs now, where it's like I've got so many people coming on, and like everyone's got a different, unique everything. Like I'm not applying everything all at once. Obviously, I'm still using the fundamental principles, but it's like it's these little ideas and how I interpret them into what I do now. And it's, again, I always feel like 100%, the more I do this, the less I know. It's wild because it's like every conversation brings something new.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that famous curve that is like when you gain a little bit of knowledge and you think that you kind of know everything, but then when you really live long enough, you kind of get that wisdom where you understand that you just don't know everything. You understand that there's so much out there to learn.
Which actually brings me back to something that you mentioned in your introduction, and it's going from the professional setting, young coaches, and then professional setting again. But what I found interesting is you alluded to the language that you use kind of changes depending on who you have on. And I love talking about this because like if you coach professional athletes, they're going to need a lot less cues than a child. How have you noticed your cues and the way you word things and the way you communicate with your athletes change from the pro setting to the youth and then coming back into pro?
Yeah, when I was working with youth athletes, we spent an incredible amount of time trying to think of the best cues to give to cure all sorts of movement problems. You know, this was before we knew a lot about intrinsic versus extrinsic cueing. We thought leg action should be punch and drive, and then eventually that evolved into try to break a pane of glass with your knee in front of you. That said, like now that I then had to jump not only into working with professional athletes, but for professional athletes that don't understand English, that created a whole new set of constraints for me, which kind of forced my coaching to evolve to a place where I spend a lot of more time as a designer trying to design programs that are trying to design drills and games that will elicit the change that I want. And it's not easy and it's not successful all the time, but I will rely less on coaching cues and more on letting my elite athletes self-organize a little bit more, try to put together a bunch of crazy constraints and try to vary the stimulus really often, and then have them self-organize in the way that this kind of created these elite athletes. But that said, I don't know that would have been as successful training a bunch of 8 and 10-year-olds who might have just big gross motor problems that could be solved with more cueing. So I think, like many things, there's a middle here, and now I'm with athletes that speak English fine, and I can kind of go between those. But I still could probably err on the side of putting a variety of different constraints and stimuli in front of them and having them just explore their athleticism on their own.
Yeah, you do have a lot of game style training within your practices. How do you organize that in terms of, okay, we are actually in a specific phase, let me find out or let me figure out the best way to achieve that through a more, I mean, I can tell from your videos that training is fun, and it's like they're having a laugh, they're having a play, they're not in that practice mode, they're in a more like enjoyment phase of it.
Yeah, well, specifically, those are almost all warm-ups, right? And so that's been one of my big aha revelations in the field, is that I stopped thinking of warm-up as just this thing to get through, to get their bodies activated, warm, pliable, and instead saw it as an opportunity to work on the stuff that specifically my team needs most at that moment. So to answer your question is like the phases. Well, right now I am in the first month with my team in Turkey, and we are playing games, yes, but we cut from those games to go do work. It's like I use the games, which are sometimes volleyball related, sometimes very often volleyball related, but instead of just traditional volleyball, they have to kick the ball sometimes, or they can only use their elbows, or they can only use their opposite hand, or one touch has to be off of your head, anything I can think of. But we're going to mix that with some microdoses of strength, because this is the part of the season where I need to be bulletproofing some bodies. So we'll take a break to do some handstand holds against the wall, some iso wall sits maybe. We'll throw medicine balls together. We'll do, we're trying to build some speed now. So we also will devote a lot of time. I'll try to find every tag game that I can think of where the girls will give me 100% acceleration at the end of a warm up. And I don't have to just ask them to please run fast. They're running fast because they want to win this game, this relay race, whatever it is. And so I try to find ways to make them intrinsically want to run at 100% or jump at 100% or be agile or just fun for the sake of fun and developing a bigger movement library in the process. If I create a silly obstacle course, but say that they can only use their left hand to pass the ball back and forth, I'm really, the obstacle course is going to have all kinds of hijinks in it. But at the end of the day, they're also practicing touches off of their opposite hand that often come up in a volleyball game and can lead to a lucky touch that saves a point. And they don't realize they're doing it. They're just they and their partner are trying to beat every other team in this warm up to see who can get the ball from here, point A to point B, the most times in the 8 minutes that I allot for that. And then we take a break and I go to make them do abs for 3 minutes because I've earned it, because everybody's laughing and everybody's smiling. I've earned it with the fun that now I can grind them out on some stuff that maybe I don't have time to do in the weight room, that my physical therapist has been begging me to do to try to make their knees feel better. And so it's that juxtaposition, it's that yin and yang of the fun stuff with the real work that is kind of that sweet spot, and especially early in this season. Towards the end of the season, it's less microdosing, isometric grinds during warm-up, more reactive stuff, more just pure play, more just things that make them feel good and make them smile at the end of a long season. But right now I'm hiding work within some of the games that are the popular parts of my Instagram collection, of course.
How does that sort of change and adapt depending on in-season training and demands? Again, I've spoken a lot with Steph Grubbs, who does a lot of microdosing, and she speaks a lot about microdosing because I know that volleyball does have quite a lot of games within the week itself. How does that training differ off-season and pre-season to then in-season, where again you're still making sure that they're having fun, but like now we're protecting, we're maintaining, we're taking care of some fundamentals to make sure you can go back out that same week?
Yeah, I think that is just, and to be clear, I am really only hired. I join teams when the season is just about to start. Like I usually only have a month to ramp up. Our season, like I said, I've been in Turkey for a month now, a little over, and our season started a week and a half ago. So I specialize in trying to get them ramped up as quickly as possible. But this is a great question, because if I did have a long off season, I'm just twisting the dial so that we're doing more of the microdosing and the grinding kind of stuff in the off season, the stuff that isn't quite as fun, but it's all the isometrics. Honestly, it's the isometrics that I know that they need. It's the eccentric stuff that I know we need. So we might be taking breaks to go step off of high boxes and land. So it might be all of these things that my physical therapist really loves. That's where I'd be leaning on the medical staff to say, hey, you tell me all of your favorite shoulder bulletproofing exercises, and I'm going to throw them into every warm up until before the season starts. And I'm still going to play. And also, I'm also constantly thinking, all right, so my physio loves a split squat isometric for knee health, let's just say, okay? And so I need to put them in 30, 45-second isos. Well, all right, let me ask, could the girls be throwing could I pair them up and have them throw a 3-kilo medicine ball back and forth and see which team can get it back and forth the most times in that 30 seconds? Because that'll that 30-second ISO not suck quite as much? Could I make it a contest to see who could knock the person over? Give them like an 8-kilo ball and try to knock your partner over with it while you're holding the ISO? Can I teach the girls to juggle while I do it? Can we do it blindfolded and see, who can do this? Can we hold that ISO and then I make them do a bunch of stupid dance moves with their arms and see if they can still maintain balance? So I'm also going to take the grinds that kind of suck and think of every way in the world that I can to make them not quite, to make them engaging, make them stimulating, make them dial in for it instead of just having to survive it, if that makes sense. So I think in an off season, I'm just doing more of the microdosing of the strength and less of the fun stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. Is like you're trying to distract them from what is actually happening. So you're kind of like you said, you're hiding the work within some fun activities.
Yeah, I got to be an expert in this in China. And you can imagine the reason the Chinese team was so good was not because of me. Manny, let's be real. It was because they practiced 3 times as much as any other team on planet Earth. Like they take those girls and anyone on my German, Dutch, or Turkish team would be buried by a Chinese practice. They wouldn't survive day 3. Like it would crush them. But the Chinese girls, and so I will get the Chinese girls to come, they'll be with me on the 6th straight day of practice, having to do strength with me. Well, that becomes an exercise and distraction. None of them want to give me any effort on Saturday evening after 6 straight days of 6 8-hour days of practice. But I have to think of ways to gamify everything I can to make them care. And that, we haven't talked too much about the weight room, but especially in the weight room where none of this matters if you're not giving me 100% effort. And so that's all about tricking them. And that's where my mind goes in warm up and in the weight room. How can I employ toys, games, gamification to really trick athletes into giving me more effort than they maybe want to?
I think that's a good point, and I kind of want to touch on this so you obviously had the Chinese team for the Olympics. How does that cycle sort of come about where you're now having to take them for, again, year-to-year competitions to make sure that they qualify for the games, and then your other games? How does that sort of how do you plan that out, and how does it play out?
Well, there is, of course, the Olympics are the marquee event. That's why we call it an Olympic quad. You got 4 years to ramp up for the Olympics. But in actuality, the year after the Olympics is not quite as crucial. But the year after that, you have the World Cup. Then you have the World Championships. And then you have the Asian Champions or European Championships. There's always an extremely important event at the end of every summer that during the summer feels crucial. And they get more and more crucial as you need to start qualifying for the Olympics, of course. So I don't ever hold anything really in reserve. At the beginning of every single summer, I am trying to get them in peak physical shape by the end of that summer when we have that big marquee event. And you can never at least I can't look 4 years in advance because you just don't know about your job security. You never know what's going to happen if your head coach is going to get fired. When I was I'm in Germany and I'm on my 4th head coach in 5 years. So you just don't planning that far in advance. You can get, I don't want to waste any great exercises or great ideas. I use them all and we start from scratch and I build them up to be hopefully PRing at the end of every single summer.
You also spoke about the realities of off-season, pre-season, and how long you actually get. This is something that I usually talk about when I am presenting on programming and periodization. It's like ideally, textbook-wise, you get like this beautiful 6, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, however long the textbook says to have, and you phase out strength, power, speed, endurance. And then I like to make my presentations like a communication style. So like I'll ask them a question, they'll answer, they'll get a chance to walk me through what they have in their head. But then I always challenge, okay, like now you only have 4 weeks to put this together. What are you doing? And they're kind of like, well, do I not get the normal amount of time? Like, no, you get 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Periodize me a plan for that. How does that look like?
Absolutely. I just finished reading The Strength Deficit, which is, a lot about how these, really utilizing the importance of eccentric strength and things like that. And so this force system idea, and I sit there being like, God, I wish I had a longer off season. Like I have to try to really cram this into the big, like 1 month, and then the beginning of the like when our season starts. And so it's a very much an art of figuring out where you shoehorn in all of these ideas, all of these great yeah, there it is. And so I really, that's part of the magic, is figuring out when you find something that would be perfect in an off season. But I don't deal with my athletes in the off season. My athletes, if we're talking about the national teams, the national teams all go away to their club teams. Like I have girls right now in Japan that aren't lifting weights hardly at all because their Japanese strength coach believes in doing more plyometric speed-based stuff. And I have athletes that are going to programs that maybe just love Pilates, and some that are going to powerlifting places. And it is they're getting a lot of different stuff right now, and that is its own. They get their own unique off seasons. And I have to kind of get everybody on the same page once they come back to me. And it is, yeah. And also not only that, not only having this wonderful idea of what you'd like to do in your off season, but then you step into a weight room in Istanbul that's been built for you, not for you, but was built before you ever got the job, and it doesn't have half the stuff you would like. Like, what if you wanted to do all this stuff and you just don't have plyo boxes? And I love eccentric overload, but no K boxes, no flywheels to be seen here. So that's another unique constraint, is that my program needs to be really adaptable for where, what I have available.
Again, we spoke about Coach Mark before, and that's something that I learned from him, because he also coached out in China, and there was a period of time where something was lost in translation, but he walked into his weight room and there was nothing in there. So he was like, during his internship, he imposes the same scenario on us. Like, what do you do then? And that made me think of everything I read is now different. Like, I'll read like strength deficit or triphasic or something on manual resistance. And like my immediate thought is like, create a program on that, just using those principles. So like when he imposed that, I went home and I was like, okay, I need to do 3-4 different workouts: upper, lower, total body, push, pull, legs, just manual resistance. What am I doing? And that first program was challenging because I was like, damn, I don't know that much about manual resistance. So then I read up on it.
It's a great exercise to expand your mind. I think a lot of my time in China having to be super adaptable, because part of my job when I went over there with Exos in that first year was to be shipped out on weekends to do a dog and pony show with my friend David Joyce, who was the physical therapist there at the time. And we would just be flown to a new province in some random weight room with 100 strength coaches around us, and we'd have to showcase what we do with whatever equipment they had available. And I think a lot of those like quick thinking on the fly stuff that is making my heart race right now and my palms sweat a little bit just thinking about it. But I think a lot of that has made me the coach that I am for the warm-up stuff, because now I've taken that mindset of being able to walk into gyms across the planet when we are competing, and I can look and see a bunch of pool noodles in the corner, and I can be like, okay, all right, I can do some cool agility with that if the girls treated those like swords, and I put 2 over there, and I can make them whatever. I've gotten pretty good at being able to take whatever we have available and turn it into a decent agility, speed, strength circuit.
Yeah. This is going to be interesting now, because if you're still having like your heart's still pounding, your palms are still getting sweaty, you can still picture this vividly. How was it going from sort of province to province and like trying to figure out what you can do with the equipment that you have?
It was survival. And there's a great story. I mean, I wish David were here to talk about this, but it was always, you would be given like 30 minutes while we pretended to set up the PowerPoint while we're really just on scratch paper saying, okay, all right, I saw some bands in the corner. We can do this, this, and this. And that means we can do all of the resisted acceleration stuff. And that means we could do this, this. And we were just rambling, and we're deleting slides because we don't have anything we can demonstrate. And we are creating new slides on the fly, scrapping parts of PowerPoint presentations because we won't be able to do the demos. But the real survival, honestly, in China came afterward, when the only way the Chinese know how to thank you for giving a 8-hour nonstop presentation is by trying to put you into a alcohol-induced coma that night. at a thank you dinner. And so I don't know how many plane flights I was just carried onto and locked into a seat. And I woke up in my bed the next day in a whole new province, not really remembering anything. That was the survival. Boy, that is another one to make me start sweating. But that's what we talk about when we get together, is how we survived a year or 6 months of giving those presentations and having to survive the thank yous.
Nice. And again, a lot of what we do in strength and conditioning is adapt to what walks in. So as well as that, like, how does that sort of carry over for when you do have, again, harder games, easier games? How does the training adapt depending on competition levels and different, again, you mentioned like different games that happen every year. Like, how adaptable is your training dependent on fatigue levels, adaptations and stressors that you're trying to implement?
Yeah, and this is where, having curated this over, like, I'm so thankful. My mentor, Lauren Seagrave, he always said, a short pencil is better than a long memory. And I took that to heart. Like, I write everything down. And I'm so lucky to have been in so many different countries and had exposure with to so many other coaches. So in America, you can definitely get into a little echo chamber of people that all believe a very similar style of training and a philosophy of training, which is a good one. But you step out of this country and you get introduced to so many other very effective ways of doing these things with different tools. And I very early on started keeping notes of this. I've always been a journaler, but I started keeping an Excel spreadsheet whenever I saw something really cool. And I started taking, when I joined the Chinese judo team, I filled up my phone memory watching their warm-ups where they're just like carrying each other around and doing like almost dance moves with each other, whether it's like moving quickly, but moving quickly with weight and body weight stuff. And I still pull on some of those great, like almost physical strength challenges. And my Excel spreadsheet has evolved over a decade, and now it is more categorized into my games that are really good when it's early season, and maybe constraining them so much that they're not having to move really fast but to drills that maybe at the end of the season I can take the restrictors off and we are moving really, really quickly, and it's more reactive. And less strength based. And it involves runs that are longer than, maybe this game involves us having to play on a much bigger court, where early in the season we would maybe risk a hamstring or something they're not used to, but by the end of the season they're not. So it's just having an effective library at this point that I know what to choose and when to choose it. Because also, it's not just me. It's also that I need to be reacting to the needs of my team at the time that are often dictated by my head coach. So if my head coach comes to me and says, Rett, I think everything is going really well, but I worry about the arm swing speed of some of the girls. I just don't think we hit as hard. Then I need to consult my file of how to hit harder games and drills that I can then either mix in with a fun game or make it the game. Maybe we're seeing who can throw a badminton birdie the farthest as a contest, or the end of an obstacle course or something. Or medicine ball, or a little sand cannonball. Maybe I'm just incorporating a ton of that for arm speed, or tons of medicine ball work. When my coach says that we have a problem, he or she better be able to see me addressing it in warm-ups for the next couple of weeks. I want to be able to tell him and say loudly to the girls, hey, we've got an arm speed warm-up today. And I know it looks like this, and it starts with these hula hoops, but it ends with somebody being able to throw that medicine ball the farthest. You get points for throwing it this far, and blah, blah, blah. And that's how this whole approach that I have, which is that it looks like fun just because it's different, honestly, Manny. I think people see the games, and maybe that sticks in their memory the most. But for me, as long as it's not monotonous, it's more effective as a warm-up. As long as it's not mundane, boring, the same thing over and over again in warm-up, then I think we're doing a better service for our athletes' athleticism, and you just have a more fluid ability to adapt it to the changing needs of your team at that moment. That's the beauty. It makes everybody happy. My head coach is happy because we're working on arm speed, and my athletes are happy because they're not doing the same skips and crawls that they did all winter long with their club team. and it's just different. Even though maybe it sucks, maybe it's hard, maybe part of my arm speed protocol is bunches of push-ups that are not fun, but at least it's different. Sorry, I got on a rant there.
No, it's all good. Again, coaches are always concerned that they go on rants, but I always explain it this way. It's not a rant to me. It's if you say a point 3 different times, 3 different ways, sorry, it's still 3 different ways that someone can translate that into their own way of doing it so they get a better picture of what you're talking about. So it's not a rant to me. It's like you're giving them the same information but in 3 different pieces to formulate this bigger, nicer puzzle in my head.
Good. Then I'll just keep going. You can mute your mic for a while. All right, here we go.
Hey, go. All you. But it's, yeah, I think, again, there's great examples of this throughout the industry. And I always love when in training or in the weight room or even like on courtside sessions, we imitate different sports for them to have a little bit more enjoyment. You're still getting the same speed, power development or strength development, but now you're incorporating different sports. Like, I saw this great example of, it was baseball athletes, but they were in a beach volleyball court throwing medicine balls over the net.
I know it.
Like, it's so effective, but like so easy to set up. Like, they're not doing much different. They're still getting that triple extension. They're having to swing this heavy ass medicine ball over to get a point. Tell me an athlete that doesn't like to get a point.
Yeah. I mean, are you kidding me? You think that if let's say I could just magically snap my fingers right now and every girl on the German national team who I train in the summer, every girl was going to be playing table tennis for 3 hours a week. Let's say they were all just playing ping pong 3 hours a week. I have a very good idea that would make their hand-eye coordination better and quicker when we got back together if they played that sport. Yeah. If you have athletes that aren't good at decelerating, I mean, imagine if they could learn fencing for a couple of months. Like, they would be incredible. So why, tennis, another good stop and go sport. Like, so why not invest in Nerf tennis rackets that are normally for kids in PE classes is an incredible thing to do. In the States, we have pickleball. Like, it's people, like old people are blowing their Achilles and their ACLs playing pickleball. Like, as we speak, 20 Achilles got ruptured playing pickleball because it demands such quick accelerations, reaction time, start, stop. To me, that just lights up my brain as what an incredible warm-up that would be for obviously getting, that would just be an incredible way to teach agility, I should say.
Yeah. Not to blow it.
Yeah.
Not to blow it.
See, also spikeball, spikeball is being used all over the planet to get athletes warm because it's a fun way to train agility. And by the way, let's just, the agility ladders of the 1990s and 2000s should be getting replaced by stuff that is actually linking perception and action, right? So agility ladders take away the reactivity that you get from having to watch another human and respond to whatever they are doing. And separating that and doing cone drills and the agility ladders and the agility hurdles, all of that took too big of a step away from what is actually true reactive agility that translates to the court. And it's a win-win because I get to save money on not buying all of that stuff. The athletes would much rather be playing spikeball, and it's going to be better for them. It's going to be more effective for them. I enjoy having a practice where the girls are sweaty and smiling and laughing more than I like having to set up serpentine cones and go into my enormous catalog of cone serpentine drills that I've used for decades working with young athletes. And so, it's a win for everybody.
100%. I also wanted to ask, how long does it take for your Excel to load up?
Well, I mean, nowadays, it was real quick when it was just so analog and all written. But now, as you know, now I have like this online video library, which is the next evolution. That now that so many people have asked me to share my library and all the ideas, and my Excel folder would have been just a nightmare of my nicknames for stuff and no explanations. So I devoted like 3 months this year to making sure there were videos for all this stuff, and then I just hosted on No Zombies video library.
Nice.
That's a monster. That's a monster. That's 500. That's 500 drills and growing.
Damn.
Ideas for warm ups. Yeah,
It takes a while.
it's big. Yeah.
But it's so you mentioned speed agility ladders, and I think everyone's hating on them quite a lot just now. And again, fair. Like, it doesn't develop much speed. But how many athletes do you know that A, don't have rhythm, or B, can't play an instrument?
Oh yeah, and I can defend agility ladders all day. I think I used one like a couple of weeks ago because my Turkish team has like 50 of them. But yes, like with the idea of rhythm, I mean, you're talking to a guy like I attracted a lot of attention for dancing during my warm-ups. So I'm not against any, like, there's nothing that I don't think is valuable if deployed well. You just have to know what you're going to get out of it,
Exactly.
you know? And so if you think it's going to be the key to great agility, I don't know that that's the case. But for rhythm and timing, I would love to have athletes pair up with one person leading and the other person having to mimic whatever they did in that ladder. To me, that would be really interesting. That would be fun because it gives some autonomy and creativity to one person, and the other person has to be reactive and kind of figure out the movement puzzle that the person in front of them just gave them. So that is what I would think of would be a really good deployment of an agility ladder. So I'm not an agility ladder hater. I just kind of I jumped on that. I'm an agility ladder hater if you think that is the panacea of teaching agility.
Yeah. No, and again, I think I've spoke to different coaches on this, and it's like everyone has their thing. Everyone has their umbrella, everyone has their silo, everyone has their way of doing things. But like I said in the lobby, like, the more I go through this industry, the less I'm like dying on hills, as opposed to like, okay, let me see other ways I can do this. Like,
yeah, absolutely. See, in the same category with agility ladders would be Smith machines. Like,
yes.
I can remember being a non-Smith machine guy for a long time, and now I'm delighted when I go into a weight room that has a Smith machine, because I have like 6 exercises I love that can only be done on Smith machines. So it's funny how that evolves.
Yeah. Again, like, I used to be a big like deadlift guy. Like, everyone had to deadlift. Everyone, like, I'm now like, okay, so.
Oh yeah, I've also had my relationship with deadlift change over the years.
I had a mentor once, so he is also an assessor for the UKSCA accreditation, and someone once put down like a Smith machine exercise for him, and he had to mark that. He got back to him and he was like, a Smith machine is only good for hanging your coat up. And I'm like, oh no. But yeah, it is that thing where, like, I think, again, we're as limited as our imagination in this field. And I think
I couldn't say it any better.
That's my favorite thing about it now. And it's like, I spoke to Christina, she's at UPenn, and we were talking about contrast training. And like, obviously contrast training is usually like high power, high velocity movement contrasted with heavy weighted movement. But like, what if we contrasted, say, rest times? Or what if we contrasted like a complete different aspect of intensities in the workout, right? Like, what else can be done taking these principles that we've already learned? Like, conjugate, very good for power, speed, power and strength development. But like, what if we looked at it as in mixing it with triphasic? Like, how can I now include the eccentric, forget what they're called, what the things that you hook onto the bar, you go down slowly and then they come off.
Oh yeah, the releasers.
The releasers. Like, what can we do with that? But like, conjugate style, can we do that? Like, what does it look like? So it's like mixing and matching these methods to like create this unique thing that we've not yet thought of, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and this is exactly what I'm talking about, where you think you've studied everything in strength and conditioning, and then somebody puts that idea in your head. Contrast training with rest intervals, like that is fascinating, right? And mixing and matching that way between philosophies. But that's free thinking. That's the stuff I'm attracted to as an old coach.
I like how your brains are turning now too. I can't wait to see those videos.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, something that I always love to talk and dive into with coaches who have coached multiple sports, but be volleyball as well. What's your take on plyometrics and adding them into their already existing high jumpy sports? And
Yeah,
what's your
this is a
considerations behind it?
very good question, and one that is often talked about in my circles, and one that my athletes, when I first came to Turkey, I had a couple athletes come up to me and ask me my philosophy on this because they were very worried about increasing their jump counts too much in the weight room or outside of the actual volleyball court. I am very strategic about the jumps that I use in the weight room. I don't want to waste a single jump that is not being done with maximal intent. So I don't believe in garbage reps on jumps in the weight room. All right, so that is to say, I will almost always jump in the weight room, but every jump we do is measured and almost always gamified. Right now, at the beginning of this season, when they go into the weight room, there's a jump mat that is going to be this first station, the first exercise they will do in the first little circuit is going to be recording a jump with a weight on their back that will get heavier and heavier as we go through. And sometimes with different kinds of resistance, we just put bands on the weight, a really tiny band on the weight for the first time for some accommodating resistance. We like a block jump off of that in one day of our programming. We do a volleyball specific approach jump off of that in one day of our program. But this is for a volume of maybe, let's say simply 5 sets of 5, 5 sets of 4, 5 sets of 3. That's the entire volume. But that is something they're not getting in that's overload, right? That's something they're not getting in the weight room. We are dropping off of boxes with weights on our back. All of these things that are essential for creating not only good jumpers, but good absorbers of force. So we're also doing this for the breaks of, after the jump. Don't love, if we were to do plyometrics, I think I would do box jumps, right? So it absorbs the landing, but I never do that because I can't control the effort. For me, they have to be giving 100%, and they give me 100% when they know I'm recording every jump, and it goes into an average that at the end of the session will crown a winner, right? And so this is part of the gamification of effort. I know that plyometrics don't work for crap if they do them at 95% or 90%. That's wasted. That's impacts that are just not ideal for me. So when I think that they might not care about it, well, then now we have teams. Now you are with you, and your cumulative jump heights for the day are going against all the other teams on our team, like all the other duos that I've created. And we're going to make you care about it because you don't want to let your partner down. And the fact that we're not just jumping with a 20-kilo bar every single time on block jumps, that sometimes we drop off of a little box to do it. Sometimes I care about the ground contact time. Sometimes I'm only counting jumps that got off the mat in under 200 milliseconds. Sometimes I only care about left-footed jumps. Sometimes I only care about jumps that originated from 2 feet behind. You had to broad jump into the jump and jump. So it's something different and interesting every time so that the competition is fresh every time, but every jump counts, every landing counts. And so that's my take, is that I believe in only doing the plyometrics, the landings that are absolutely crucial. And that will just come down to make like one exercise per lifting session that is a weighted jump. Or like a drop catch kind of thing. So that's my take on plyometrics. I don't do many, but the ones I do, we take really seriously. It's the most important lift, and the girls know. It's the only thing I'll record. Like they'll look at the weight room sheet, and they have to do 8 exercises, but I'm only recording 1 or maybe 2. Actually, I'm only recording 1, that jump. So they look at my Excel spreadsheet, and that's clearly the only thing I care about. I could give a crap how much you bench press that day. I will not ask you how many pull-ups you did or what how those stability ball curls felt, your RDL. Nope. Tell me how high that jump was. That's where I make my money, is off of you guys jumping and landing with resistance. Yeah. So that's it.
That's very interesting. It might be useful to talk about the overloaded jumps and how you're not just your program is very intent based, where everything has to mean something. Looking at as an overload as opposed to let me progress your jump count over our off season or preseason to make sure that when you are in season you can jump twice as much as you're required. I think building the accelerator and the brake is a much more effective way. This is fascinating. So yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that this is, you know, and my season with them will start when, you know, they've just finished like whatever the championship of their former season. You know, they're a month out of having, or 2 weeks after having, you know, theoretically peaked with the team they were just on. And so then I get them. So it's not like they're coming to me totally detrained. They actually should be at some decent physical shape. But I press the reset button because I know I can get a ton out of very lightweight 5 kilo bar or 10 kilo bar on their back, weight vests. And we'll start that way so that we don't get any immediate injuries from, you know, feeling a weight on your back and jumping as high as you can. But I start slowly working up until hopefully we're doing these block jumps with 60 kilos on our back. You know, we're not going to jump high, but we're damn well going to try. And so I think that if I can make my weight room a place where I don't have to sweat intent is really, as you said, I mean, I spend almost just too much brain power finding ways to make sure that they're going to give me 100% intent. And if I have intent, I almost think that the exercise selection doesn't matter too much, but I am all in on weighted squats and squat jumps and approach jumps. And so we're gonna attack that in conjugate myriad ways, but we're always going to be attacking that throughout a season. It's going to scale up and down. It's going to get heavy. It's going to get light, single foot, double foot, as I said, but it will always be there. And it's the most crucial thing we do.
I think as well, like I might got some heat for this, but like we're currently too focused on a lot of the numbers that we can get from whatever test we want to do. But I do think like strength and intent is a lot that's lacking in this industry right now. And it's like we've gone far too into the sports science, but we kind of need to like see where we can start coaching again. Because like an athlete isn't going to give you full intent if he doesn't care, right?
Right.
So then how do we build that? How do we get them to be like, okay, this might suck, this might whatever, but like I know coach has this reason, so I'm still going to run through that wall for him.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And this is the crucial tenet of this kind of no zombies philosophy that I have that is very easily seen in the weight room with in the warm up with all the games that we do. Of course, it makes a lot of sense. I don't like athletes that can sleepwalk through my warm up like a zombie, but that also applies to my weight room where I am using every tool at my disposal in order to make them give me that full 100% effort and intent. And I think that is a place that a lot of coaches are lacking. If we're sprinting on a treadmill, right now we have this beautiful curve treadmill that we got from Techno Gym, but the computer on it has been out of batteries for the last month and a half, which has been okay while the girls are learning to run on a curved treadmill at, you know, starting out at 75%, 80, 85, and now we are at 100%. Like now I need them cooking on that thing for 5 seconds at 100%, because I know, knock on wood, we're not in risk of injury because we've been going in, we've been slowly getting them used to it and it looks good. But guess what? The computer still doesn't work. And I am livid because I cannot guarantee they're going to give me, because there's going to be another gear that they all find when that computer comes to life and they start competing to see who can get 25 kilometers per hour on that thing for a second. Who can light that thing up for 25 kilometers a second? That's going to become a big badge of honor. And my weight room is going to be cackling and they're going to be screaming and cheering. It is going to be a whole nother gear that I've gotten as compared to last week, where on the sheet it said, give me 100%. And I'd be lucky if half of them were giving me 93%. I can just tell. And what I'm measuring, what I'm monitoring, what I'm measuring, what you measure gets done. And so I need those tools in order to do my job, to be able to ensure effort.
On that, because you've just mentioned how much sprinting plays into your training, how much do you focus on the posterior chain to make sure that they're, again, impacting that floor as hard as possible?
Yeah, it's tricky because, you know, volleyball is in some respects a very anterior chain sport. We have to decelerate so much when we do that spike jump, right? And when we have a net in front of our faces, you can't hip hinge very much or you're going to forehead plant into the net. So it's a very anterior sport. That said, we certainly get a lot of boost from, you know, in the approach to spike. That's a nice powerful hip hinge. Anyone that follows me knows that I love a Bulgarian split squat. It is one of our it is the marquee thing that we look for. It's kind of the only lift that I do where we really track and celebrate the hell out of being able to get 60 kilos on a bar and be able to do it 5 times with the knee touching the pad at the bottom. That is just a rite of passage in our weight room that all athletes strive to achieve. So that's our big posterior chain lift. But as you've alluded, we also have to hit the other side of that strength curve, and we're doing that on our treadmill, and we're doing that with our spike jumps and things like that. We also are big fans of RDLs and kind of a lot of the standards we'll do. I push a lot of Nordics into my warm-ups to make sure we're getting that. It's all part of keeping knees healthy. And so you can't ignore that posterior chain, and you have to make sure you are getting it on both sides of that curve. So I think we do a pretty good job of it. And I make sure the girls know it's important.
Yeah, because I've always been, again, I speak a lot with the Olympic weightlifters, and that is one issue that they suffer a lot with, is that hamstring weakness. And I've always been fascinated on how coaches that are predominantly anterior, how do you trickle that in to A, make sure your athletes are balanced, but B, to make sure that they can still, again, for me, it's the same intent, but like I need my athletes to be aggressive against the floor. Like that's one thing I look for. So like, how do we build that? It's like you need anterior strength, but you also need to have equally strong posterior chain. So like how are coaches developing that throughout different sports?
I mean, thank God we live in an era where it's fashionable for my athletes to have big glutes, where they aren't like, oh my God, please don't make my glutes too big. I've never heard that from a single athlete. So like this month, my first month in Turkey, where the girls' butts are so sore that they can't sit down on a toilet, like they're not super mad at me because they are envisioning bikini season, I guess. But that's the great thing. It's a win-win because I know that this is a key to them keeping healthy over the course of a season. And that is our primary posterior chain exercise, along with, on another day, we do some barbell RDLs, which is another one that really goes after the hamstrings. Yeah. We would do more on the glute hamstring machine, but we only have one. So like I said, I'm constrained by my equipment. It's not that I don't like that. I love that exercise. We would do a lot of speed stuff with it, but no, we don't have enough.
Yeah, limited as your imagination.
Yep. All right. Touche.
But saying that, like I do love a GHR, but I don't have one right now. But I still need the same stimulus. So it's like I understand exactly what you're saying. It's how can I still get that same work, but with what I do have?
Yeah.
Again, I can't not bring this up because I do love to talk about it. Obviously, volleyball is a big accelerator and powerful on the shoulders. What do you do to prepare them for that velocity, that aggressiveness, and how is that developed over your time working with them?
Yeah, it's a lot about protecting what God has given them, honestly. I have worked with too many athletes who are the weakest on my team and hit the ball the hardest. So that correlation is not very strong. That's all about attachment points of the things inside your shoulders, your tendons. And so that said, when you have that kind of velocity, we have to create a shoulder that can take swings at that velocity and keep it swinging all season long. I do a ton of straight arm strength. Like I learned a lot from my time working with the gymnasts in China. We do a lot of, right now my athletes are seeing how long they can hold ring position. So basically just holding your arms down by your side while you dangle from the rings. And I have them try to bring their knees up so we get some abs in it. And I try to get them to put their legs in an L for an L sit sometimes. But I'm really just trying to create a dynamic shoulder control with a straight arm. Because if you look at volleyball, most all of the really dynamic parts of volleyball happen with a straight arm. From digging a volleyball to blocking a volleyball to swinging a volleyball, it's all straight arm. So we do a lot of hanging from a bar. We just make sure we're pushing and pulling in all planes a little bit. We do a lot, as I said, isometrics with straight arms. I already mentioned that we do a bunch of handstand holds in our warm-ups as a easy strength microdose for that stuff. But also in the last couple of years, I've gotten into a lot of the landmine exercises. to be able to get a little bit more of rotational power with my shoulder work. So a fundamental exercise in our weight room is throwing landmines to each other. So we'll do ballistic landmine jerks from what we call like a coiling core. You can follow the Landmine University guys or the WEC method guys that introduced me to this concept. And there, I think that there is truth to this idea of your spine not just being a conduit for force going through the system, but also being an engine of its own force. And so we are playing with this idea by having the girls, they use the landmine in every single weight room warm up when we're getting ready to lift, but also on certain days of the week, we are either jerking really heavy weight ourselves or we are throwing weights to each other and we're seeing who can throw a weight the fastest. So maybe I'll put accelerometers on those bars so that we can compete because, of course, I don't love a power exercise unless I'm measuring it and the girls are competing in it. Or we just simply say, hey, you go as heavy as you can while you're still able to throw a landmine to vertical. So that person that's spotting you catching the bar, they let it go all the way up to vertical. And if it's still going vertical, your next set gets heavier. See who can keep throwing that thing up to vertical. And that's an easy way to gamify these coiling core ballistic jerks that we will do. And that's it's a big part of our shoulder routine now because we're getting explosivity out of it as well as a little dynamic stability and just really getting, And also I can compete like I like.
Yeah. I like how everything turns into competition. I fucking love it.
Yeah.
But I do, so I've mentioned this a couple times, but David Weck kind of gets a bad name just now because of like the extrinsic takes he has. But if we take it at its fundamental core, like Vernon Griffith talked about this in the Power Project podcast. They actually had a brilliant example of quad amputee, so like no legs, no arms, but the person was walking on a treadmill. Yeah. So like, and the thing is like the spine has so much movement that it's like, why aren't we exposing that? Like I spoke with a private coach I met out in Seattle when I was there, and we had this great talk about like different planes and different angles and how we expose our athletes to it, and like why is that beneficial? And it's like our body has so many movements that it can achieve. Why not expose them to that? Like, what's going to happen? Their spine's going to fall? No. We're probably going to make it a little bit stronger. As long as we're not doing stupid stuff, like silly stuff. Yeah. Like, progressively loading the spine might not be the worst thing possible.
Yeah, Vernon Griffith will say, like, you explore the corners, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, right? And we spend, a lot of times we've been so protective, especially about spinal stuff, and for good reason in a lot of it. But, it's time to correct a little bit and see that, hey, if we're always just in perfect neutral spine when we're doing everything, then are we not doing our athletes a disservice when in the natural flow of sport they get out of alignment, when they have to put their suitcases into the middle seat of a car, when they have to lift their groceries out of the inside of their trunk and they have to go out of alignment? Are we not doing people a disservice by not preparing them for these movements? And so I'm an advocate of exploring these places. As you said, I think you're right that David Weck might suffer from, he's such a free thinking, like I said, and there's nobody that exemplifies the idea of thinking outside the box more than this guy. Whereas you might not agree with all of his takes, and sometimes it's hard to agree with the take with he's chomping on a cigar and he looks crazy and he's spewing and he blah, blah, blah. But hey, he has a lot of really good ideas, and the spinal engine is one of them. Double down arms when running is also another really interesting idea that speed coaches seem to resonate with. I like it.
Everyone uses something that he created, but we never attribute it to him. It's like the boozy ball. Right. That's whack. Like we all use it, but like when it comes to like some of, because like the idea is still the same. The idea for the boozy ball was that transfer, that instability, that awkwardness motion. Like he's still doing it. Like it's still him, but he's now found different ways to achieve it. And it's, again, it goes back to what we were saying, is like, how can we take something that's been done for a while, but like reimagine and reinvent it differently now?
Yeah, how did we not mention the Bosu ball when we were mentioning the Smith machine and the agility ladders as the most maligned piece of gym equipment on the planet, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah, and it's just that a lot of people just didn't understand it. You know, Bosu stands for both sides up, yet most people kind of do that flat surface up for the super instability, whereas with the ball up and you're like squeezing while you're doing squats, that's a whole different animal. And there's something to that tension and that adduction while you're doing some movements that is interesting. I mean, if you're talking about the ways that I'll conjugate some of our upper body exercises, stand on the Bosu ball, squeeze it with your legs like you're trying to pop it. Well, now I just got my adduction, for the week.
100%. It's, yeah. Again, we keep coming back to the same thing. Is just be open-minded to everything. Like just be explorative. I'm actually playing with this idea of like, again, there's a couple different sayings that we all hold very dear in this industry. It's every road leads to Rome, 1,000 ways to skin a cat, a toolbox. We all have it. But like, it's starting to like think of like, okay, but what does it mean? Like, I like to use tools in the toolbox because it's a great visual for me. Like, here's things that I use, that's the top drawer. Here's things that I'm exploring and experimenting with. Here's my second drawer. First drawer is like things I use. Second drawer is things that I don't always use but can use if my top isn't being used or it's not effective. My third drawer is exploratory and experimental. Things I learned from clinics, things I see on TikTok, Instagram, all these social media sites. Once they come out of the fourth, they're now in exploratory and experimental. So like I'm testing them out, see if they work. Because if they work with me, I can drip feed it to my athletes and see how that works. Then it can go to tier 2. Then from tier 2, it can go to tier 1. And like, how does that all play around? And it's, again, I'm toying around with this idea, but it's imagining our tool sets and how we can use it to fit everything that comes into the door.
And I'll add to that, because I love that analogy but my third drawer would be where I'm using warm-up to experiment with as much of this stuff as I can. For example, when I learned about knees over toes guy a couple of years ago, I saw, okay, this flies in the face of what I've been taught. This doesn't jive, but the anecdotal evidence is getting overwhelming. And I have 2 girls on my team that insist on doing a bunch of knees over toes stuff, said they never felt better. So for that entire year, I had bands on the girls and they are doing resisted back pedals to start multiple warm-ups. Before we do a fun game, we are resisting each other, back pedaling across the floor and back. And sure enough, a lot of the athletes said that made their knees feel better going into a practice and overall. Well, now when I have curved treadmills that can have resistance, well, now that's already been vetted. That's gone from 4th drawer up to 1st drawer because I've got 2 of those treadmills and I can have them doing reverse backpedaling on those treadmills as part of our weight room circuit. So I use my warm-up as a time to vet those exercises and move them up drawers when possible.
Yeah. So like, that is the response I have been getting to this idea. And it's like, again, I love these images that like I can relate to. So like, you can physically see a tool going from one drawer to the other. And it's like, how are we experimenting with this to either move them or take them away depending on what's needed?
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to steal it. I'll probably make a reel about it next week.
Just tag me in it. It's fine.
I'll tag you, of course.
No, so appreciate you so much for coming on today. I don't want to take too much of your time today.
Oh, Manny, great conversation. This was easy. This was a lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
And got into some areas that I haven't gotten to talk about on a podcast before. So I really appreciate that.
No, thank you. It's, again, I love talking, and I think, again, I brought this up to you, but like, I always keep a little notepad next to me because we do go through different ideas and concepts, and like the dive is what makes it interesting for me. And again, to sort of see how you picture and see things happening in real time.
Yeah, you asked the right questions that I felt like I got on a couple of good rants to really get my philosophy out there.
Appreciate that.
So I appreciate that, dude. I appreciate it.
If you can let people know where they can find you and reach out if they have any questions.
Yeah, so Instagram is where I'm putting most of my effort right now. I am generally speaking, that's where everything will go first. And as anyone that follows my account knows, I have this year finally answered the many calls to put my ideas from my Excel workbook to a library online where it's all a video library. It's much like Netflix. So when you go to the No Zombies library that you can find a link to in my bio on Instagram. When you go there, it is like you get to scroll by what equipment you have available. So if you have, if you have Bosu balls, if you have noodles or sticks or anything like that, you can sort by what you have or what biomotor ability you're looking. If you want to find speed drills, you can sort them that way too. Just like Netflix lets you, has a bunch of drills. So that's been I've been really, really happy with how pleased people have been with this. Yeah, there it is.
Perfect. Appreciate you so much.
Hey, thank you for giving me the opportunity, Manny. This was great.
Peace.